What's up, everybody? It's time for another Cat's Cozy Games tutorial. My name is Vindrake, and I present to you the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to the evage. In this guide, we'll talk about some AE2, how to passive your first tungsten, we'll give you an overview of all the new multis in evage, how to passive epoxid for your advanced circuit boards, how to get to Mars, and a brief overview of power. Oh man, EV is jam-packed with so much stuff, so you know what? Let's just get straight into it. Alright, so by popular demand, you all asked for it, so we're bringing it to you, the ultimate guide to evage. So this probably won't be as long as other guides normally are, but we're going to try to go over as many things as we can in as short as time as possible. So if you are looking for guides on AE2, we did do an Ultimate Beginner's Guide to AE2, and that is over an hour and a half long, so be sure to go check that out. I'm going to link that in the description of the video. Definitely go check that out because, you know, some of the things that we go over are how to get your first AE2 parts, how to put it all together, what an ME controller does, how ME interfaces work, your drives, your storage cells, different terminal panels, molecular assembler, your crafting storages, how to get your first auto crafts done in single block GT machines, fluid storage. We go over a whole lot of that as well. And then we start going into like how to use AE2 for a bunch of passive processes, how to do auto crafting in a multi-block, especially with an item and a fluid together using a subnet. We go over that. Here we did like acetic acid and acetone, for example. With fluid P2P, we go over a lot of fluid P2P. Also, how to get one of these really cool big controllers that has a whole lot of channels. I believe this can hold over 20,000 channels when all is said and done. And how to use P2P in order to interface with that. And then we go over different uses of subnets for like passive processes and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot in that video. I definitely recommend it. But we'll be using a little bit of AE2 in this video as well. So hopefully you checked out that guide already. First thing is you probably want to make an EV assembling machine. You know, there's a couple of different quests in the evage that you can kind of immediately go to. Chem bath, chem reactor, and cutting machine. You could go ahead and get that. I mean, you're going to need all of these things eventually. I know that EV stuff is kind of expensive initially, but yeah, you're probably... So you could get the chemical reactor EV. Honestly, though, I really think you should be moving more towards large chemical reactors at this point. And as you can see, I'm going to be showing this off in a little bit, but molten epoxid, I really like using the LCRs. The nice thing about it as well is that you can upgrade the energy hatches on this later on. And, you know, you're not stuck with just an EV machine, right? You can upgrade this and scale it up to your needs in the future. So there is one single block that I definitely recommend right off the bat, and that is the Advanced Chemical Bath 3. Yeah, this right here, which is, you know, not crazy expensive. Yeah, this is definitely doable. And the reason for that is because you probably have a bunch of crushed ilmenite ore from the moon. And there are different ways that you could use this. You know, you could take the dust and you could do this for 3 rutile dust for 5 ilmenite dust, which is not a bad ratio, by the way. Like, if you've been doing this up until this point, I definitely recommend it. However, there is an even better use for ilmenite ore, and that is this right here. 1 crushed ilmenite ore gives you 2 rutile dust. And as we went over in the HV guide, if you set up rutile processing, you start out with your rutile dust here, and then you take it down the line and you eventually get titanium ingots. So hopefully you have that set up already, because you are going to need a lot of titanium in the evage. So yeah, be sure to go check out the HV guide if you haven't done that. But lots of rutile dust with this. And by the way, you get this green water solution. All you do is put that in the electrolyzer and you get your sulfuric acid back. So it's a full, just 2 machine loop. Actually, very, very easy. You get extra iron dust and oxygen as well. Not only that though, you get the ilmenite slag dust. And you put that in a centrifuge. Look at that. Iron, niobium, titanium, manganese, magnesium. Lots of really, really good stuff. So I feel like the rutile processing via ilmenite is kind of a no-brainer. So be sure to set that up. Shouldn't take you too long to set that up. However, there is a whole line down here. See this horizontal line? We're going from right to left with this. So we ultimately want to get tungsten steel, and then HSSG in order to get our rocket to Mars. So you definitely need to go down this route. Click on the Pulverize the Planet quest, and there's a couple different things that you could do. You could take the moonstone dust, you could centrifuge it, and you're looking for this right here, tungstate dust, right? 2.5% chance for 4 tungstate dust. So you could macerate a bunch of moonstone to get that. Here's what I actually recommend. is this part right here, the end stone. So you macerate end stone, and then you end up getting end stone dust. And then if you put that into a centrifuge, tungstate dust, platinum metallic powder dust, which is really important for especially like your baby plat line. You need a lot of platinum in this age, actually, starting in this age. And then sand, and then helium. Helium you're going to need for superconductor and other such things later on. So definitely start stocking up the helium. And yeah, I've actually got like a little centrifuge set up. We'll go over all the multi-blocks that you could get in EV. One of them is the multi-block centrifuge. And so you set it up kind of the same way you do in LCR, in the sense that, you know, you put an energy hatch and a maintenance hatch, and this one actually needs a muffler. And you can actually look at the centrifuge tooltip. You know, when you're building all these multis, you can definitely hold left shift when you're looking at them. And you probably discovered this by now, but it'll show you all the casings that you need. Sometimes the multi-block structure visualization in NEI kind of lies to you, especially on the placement of things, right? Like, you don't need to put these in these places. But yeah, we've got end stone dust, so you would just macerate that in like your steam grinder or whatever. And we pop that in, and this is running at, yeah, EV power. And so we're getting sand, tungstate, platinum, helium. They're percentage chances, so you won't always get the exact same things. Hang on to your platinum metallic powder dust, because you'll need that later on. You're going to need that for actually this portion down here. And I am going to direct you to another video. It is on the baby plat line. I show you how to set that up fully, step by step. So be sure to go check that video out in the description. But yeah, we're getting sand as well, and then tungstate dust. This is the important stuff, right? So what we're going to do with tungstate dust is we're going to make this right here, sodium tungstate. And so that's where our autoclave comes in. And so you do need to get the EV single block autoclave, which is this right here. So let me go ahead and get that started. Yep, there we go. All right, you put that in with sodium dust, water as well. So I've got a water reservoir, which you should be able to make right now. Yeah, it's just EV pumps. Very, very small space that it takes up. And we've just got a pump set to import right there. And yeah, we're making this sodium tungstate. And then that's being sent into an input hatch that is inside this LCR, this large chemical reactor. By the way, you do get, oh, there's the input hatch right there. So I'm actually using ender conduit, because you end up like having to utilize almost every single side of this autoclave. So we're powering it from behind. We actually need an electrolyzer above. I'll show you that in a second. You're getting the water to the left. And then, yeah, we're bringing in the tungstate dust through item conduit. And then we also have interfluid conduit to bring the sodium tungstate over to the LCR. And then you get lithium as a byproduct, so just store that on the side. So you put that into the LCR, then you're going to do this next step, scheelite dust. So calcium chloride, you need to get a little bit of calcium chloride. You could just do that, let's see, what are the different recipes? You can take calcite dust and hydrochloric acid. If you don't have calcite dust, you can get quicklime and carbon dioxide, oxygen, calcium, and carbon. You'll find a recipe that suits you. But you only need so much of this, maybe a stack at the most, because this actually recycles. This loops in the system. So you take that, the sodium tungstate we talked about earlier, you get something called scheelite. You're actually going to be getting way more scheelite from Mars once you go there. So what I actually do is I have a separate drawer here. So I have an output bus, and that is filtered to scheelite dust. And then that output's right here. The reason that we put it in a drawer first is because you're going to want to manually go put a bunch of scheelite dust in here from Mars later on. And so you want this setup to be expandable to, materials that you get later on. So you won't always need just the tungstate dust. And so, yeah, then that goes into an input bus back into the LCR. So we're using the LCR for multiple processes. I believe just 2 of them. And then the salt dust. That's a byproduct, but you definitely want to electrolyze that. So when you electrolyze that, you're going to get chlorine, which you could just store in a super tank above. And then you're also going to get sodium. And so that's where our sodium dust kind of comes back to play. So actually, let me go ahead and get this on. And there we go. We're making scheelite dust. We're making salt. That's awesome. And then we'll see the salt enter the electrolyzer here in just a second. Yep, there we go. And then we're getting our sodium dust. So we'll see the sodium pop in here. Boom, there we go. And then the cycle can repeat, which is awesome. So next thing you're going to do with that scheelite dust is you're going to be making tungstic acid dust. And this is like the second to last part of this process. You're going to be inputting hydrochloric acid. Now, I recommend at this point just having sources of hydrochloric acid and sources of chlorine and all these other things separate. So you might just have a place, in your base that you're making hydrochloric acid with hydrogen and chlorine. Maybe you keep a full super tank of it around. And then you can start moving that around with AE2 as well, with the fluid transport, fluid storage buses, dual interfaces that we showed in the AE2 video. Really, really comes in handy, right? We're putting in hydrochloric acid, I believe, yeah, right here, just in the front. And then, as a result, we're getting the tungstic acid. There's our calcium chloride, right? So we want that to loop back. The calcium chloride dust is actually right here. The reason I have a drawer for this as well is because if you're putting scheelite directly in here, then you're actually going to kind of back up on calcium chloride dust. And you want to make sure that you don't get too much of this inside the LCR. So you need kind of like a place, an exterior place to kind of store that stuff. Maybe even a void upgrade there at a certain point, because you might just have too much of this stuff. You could set up something where you kind of like passively process like excess amounts of this. You can electrolyze it into calcium and chlorine if you want to do that. When you move over to the scheelite dust. Until then, if you're just relying on tungstate dust, you'll just end up with a set amount of this, like 64 or something like that. Anyway, I have that. So I have an exterior storage. Then we're taking that into the input bus. And then that can go back and make more scheelite dust, right? So that also loops. But yeah, ultimately, we're getting that tungstic acid dust. So that is outputting right here and going into an EBF next door. And I do kind of recommend having a localized EBF specifically for this passive process. Because what you're going to do, you're going to make tungsten trioxide. And this stuff, you're going to need so much of this. This is incredibly important. And it's going to be responsible for 2 different processes. So let me show you that. They're both blast furnace processes. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to save this, either that or split this up and make 2 different things with it. You're going to want to make tungsten dust. And the reason that you want to make tungsten dust is because we need a lot of tungsten steel. And you put that in a mixer with steel dust circuit 1, you get tungsten steel. Tungsten steel, you can even tell just by the quest book, very, very important over here. Tungsten steel for the rocket. I think you need 6 initially, something like that. But you'll need way, way more of this in the future. And actually, if you want to make your EV energy hatches, which you absolutely will want to do this tier, you actually need tungsten steel for the extreme voltage coils. So yeah, keep that in mind. Going to need a lot of tungsten steel. Not only that though, you're going to need tungsten. Tungsten you oftentimes need for like cables. And the way you do that is 8 tungsten trioxide dust, 3 carbon dust, boom, you get 2 tungsten ingots. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, can't I just smelt the tungsten dust? You know, convert it all to tungsten dust and then just make ingots with tungsten dust? Well, you can, but look at this. Circuit 11 with nitrogen, 500 seconds at EV, double HV energy hatch. It's pretty rough. Versus if you take the tungsten trioxide dust, put it with carbon dust, you get 2 in 400 seconds, right? So like more than less than half the time per ingot, basically. So I highly recommend splitting up that trioxide dust and sending it in separate ways. Later on, you'll just be able to hold on the trioxide dust, and then you'll be able to, on demand, decide what you want to do with it with AE2 and craft the different things that you need on demand. But you're going to want this going, kind of passively for a while, or, take many, many stacks, bring them over here to the EBF, send them in, maybe I want to do circuit 2, I would put hydrogen in there, and then we'd be good to go, right? With the carbon dust as well. Or no, actually, hydrogen circuit 2 would give us the dust, right? Yeah. So just keep both those recipes in mind, and you should be in good shape. And by the way, TPV coils, you are going to need those. So check this out. Tungsten steel. If you want to make tungsten steel ingots, which you got to do, you're going to need these TPV coils. So 16 TPV coils, and that is TPV alloy, nichrome. How do you get TPV alloy? Let's check that out real quick. Platinum. Yeah, you're going to need quite a bit of platinum, titanium dust, vanadium. And by the way, you need these TPV coils as well to get a fluid terminal for AE2. So you definitely, you got to get TPV. And yeah, the best way to get that platinum is definitely going to be the baby plat line. So you're going to get aqua regia, you're going to have a whole loop, a whole process. I can actually show you real quick. Again, go check out the video if you're fully interested in this. But we actually set up a whole passive subnet. See the cyan network right here? That's all a passive area dedicated to this. Because you end up kind of expanding this out to more and more elements like iridium, osmium, ruthenium, etc. And a subnet is kind of a good way to go. So if you want to learn how to do that, definitely check out the video. But yeah, we're communicating with the purple, the main net, with cyan, with the subnet. And yeah, as you can see, getting plenty of platinum dust this way. So definitely a good route to go. You don't need this many LCRs necessarily. I just did it because I like kind of, step by step, one step being dedicated to each LCR. Makes it kind of easier to expand things in the long term. You'll need a sifter, EBF. It's a whole lot of work. That's why we dedicated a video to it. By the way, if you're enjoying the content, please like, subscribe, and comment. And come watch Cat and I stream on weekdays, Monday and Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Thursday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on Twitch or on YouTube. Hope to see you there. By the way, I'm going to deviate here just for a second and show you all a really, really cool trick that you could do with spray cans. If you don't know how to get spray cans, by the way, yeah, you basically need like chemical black dye. You don't need the bottler, actually. You could just like make an empty spray can and you can get it directly. Like you can use it kind of like a fluid cell, basically. These are really easy to make. But you have to make the different chemical dyes. It's kind of annoying until you get the whole plat line in IVH and you can make the infinite spray can, which just sort of has all the colors on it, which is really nice. But check this out. Okay, we got an electrolyzer, which is an IV block, but we're just turning salt and rock salt into chlorine, right? Very, very simple. And so what we're doing is, I've colored these black and red. And if you look at the colors again, I hit middle click with the infinite spray can. You see these are in kind of a particular order. And if you actually look up dyes in NEI, they're in that exact same order. And this order matters greatly. So let me show you what's going on with this. Let's say that you always want to prioritize one input hatch over another input hatch for some reason. You can do this. So I've got rock salt in the black one right now. And so that should make potassium instead of sodium. And watch this. Boom, potassium dust. That's awesome. But what if I wanted the salt to go first instead? Well, we could literally reverse this, where black, which is again to the left of red, so it comes first, where black is now the salt, and then we turn this on, it should be sodium. Boom, sodium dust, right? Which is really, really cool. So let's say that you wanted to prioritize certain inputs here. We got two different things going on in this LCR for the tungstate dust and the scheelite and all that. Let's say that we wanted to have the sodium tungstate always go first, right? So we could paint this black, and if you right click it, you actually see it changes the GUI to black as well. And so what we could do is we could have that, and then the calcium chloride dust as well. We could also make that black. And what that also does, not only does it make sure that this goes first, but it also keeps those as like a pair. So only the black input hatches and input buses can kind of communicate with each other. So if I painted this one right here, for the scheelite dust, if I painted that red, for example, and that needs to go with the hydrochloric acid, right? So we made the hydrochloric acid red, and then we made the scheelite dust red. So those will only communicate with each other. But yeah, the nice part about that is it's always going to prioritize the black over the red. So yeah, definitely play around with that. I'm finding more and more uses in the game. Once I discovered this, I feel like not a lot of people don't know about this. But yeah, definitely play around with that. Again, you kind of want spray cans for like painting cables, like Gregtech cables and stuff like that. Making sure like EV doesn't connect with the HV. Just kind of helps with your sanity with that. So yeah, do check that out. All right, it is time to talk about multi-blocks, and there are a ton of new multi-blocks in the EV age. EV and IV is where like all of the multi-blocks really start to like come into play. But they're kind of split between those two ages. So let's go to mass processing, and it's going to be this area right here with the centrifuge, and it's going to be all of these multi-blocks right here. So yeah, check out all of these quests. I'm going to show you each of these. We kind of already looked at the centrifuge. Centrifuge is very straightforward. You just put an energy hatch. All of these multi-blocks, you can double energy hatch. I believe, yeah, every single one of these, you can double energy hatch to overclock once, which really comes in handy at certain points. So yeah, check that out. Centrifuge is very self-explanatory, right? Then you've got the lathe. Let me tell you, the lathe is freaking awesome, especially for making the quartz rods, which you need a lot of for applied energistics. So we could take Certus quartz rods. Let's look at the normal recipe, like the single block recipe. Yeah, 24.5 seconds at LV. Even if you do that at HV, that's still like 6 seconds per rod. EV, 3 seconds per rod. But here's the beautiful thing about some of these multi-blocks. Look at that tooltip up at the top. Max parallel 24. So if we provide enough power for it to do this 24 times, it could do 24 times at once. Also look at that speed. Speed, 400%. Absolutely amazing. And so for each of these multi-blocks, you can look at the tooltip, and it's like a decent explainer on what's going on. Yeah, 8 parallels per casing, or a pipe casing tier. So you could look at the multi-block structure, and you'll get a little slider here for item pipe. So you'll definitely want to upgrade to like the platinum item type casing eventually. And then, you've got osmium, which would be like an evage, quantium. And this kind of loses its punch as time goes on because it's an additive thing, right? So, the first time you do it 8 to 16, that's double, right? 16 to 24, that's pretty good. 24 to 32, we're starting to get some diminishing returns, right? So something to keep in mind, this is very common among a lot of multis, these multis in EV and IV. So do be aware of that. But let's check this out. Certus quartz dust. Not enough item output space. Whoops. Yeah, look at that. 32 rods per second, right? Yeah, it's actually kind of insane. So I recommend the lathe as soon as possible, especially if you're getting heavily into AE2. This is really going to be a time saver. Something else to consider, a lot of these multis are going to use certain types of glass block, and some of the multis, the voltage tier of the glass block. So if we look at this, for example, this is glass tier HV for borosilicate glass. Some of these multis require that you have the same glass tier as whatever energy hatch you put on. So for example, sometimes if I have an EV energy hatch, I would need EV glass block, right? So I'd have to look at glass block and I'd have to do titanium, right? Glass tier EV, right? Now, you'll usually say on the tooltip whether this is the case or not. And with the lathe, that is not the case, right? So you can actually put any glass that you want. It does have to be like a tiered glass though. So you could use, if you've gotten into Botania, glass tier EV mana glass. Mana glass is actually really easy to make once you get Botania up and running. So you could actually, the borosilicate glass can kind of be a little expensive because of the boron that's required for it. This stuff right here, which is very, very expensive. You have to mine a bunch of salt and rock salt, and then electrolyze that. Electrolyze borax dust from that. That gives you boron dust. Sourcing this borax dust can be a really, really big pain. As you can see, it's like only a chance output here. If you have the salt bee, you're going to get so much borax dust, right? It's really going to solve this problem. So yeah, I kind of recommend that if you don't mind getting into bees. Salt bee is amazing. Also amazing for chlorine, right? Now, listen, if you're doing benzene, I got a treat for you. Industrial coke oven, this thing is so good. So we're using the same recipe as like the pyrolyze oven. So we're putting spruce logs, circuit 10, and then nitrogen as well. And if we do this, boom, 1,200 wood tar per second. Very, very nice. And so, you could do charcoal byproducts. You could do several things with this industrial coke oven. If you're going to make this, there are two different tiers of casings, these middle ring casings. I highly recommend just going ahead and getting these, the heat-proof coke oven casing. I think it's just a bunch of steel. Yeah, a little 8. Oh, you know what? They did kind of make this a little harder to get recently. Okay, you actually might not be able to get HSS until a little bit later. Yeah, you need HSS G coils. Wow. Yeah, they did actually change that. Yeah, so you will actually have to get these lesser casing initially. The heat-resistant coke oven casing. That's fine. It'll still get the job done. It's still really good. These right here, these are amazing. This is the industrial material press, and it has two different modes. So take your screwdriver out. Check this out. It says running mode at the top, bending right now. If I right-click this, now it's in forming press mode. And so, yeah, you will want two of these, one for bending machine, one for forming press. And the bending machine is amazing, right? We just throw in a bunch of iron ingot. Look at that. 256 iron plates in 3.2 seconds. These multi-blocks are a really good feeling when you first get them. Because, you were just making so much stuff so much quicker than you were before. Forming press is actually really, really good for AE2 stuff in particular, right? So, you've got all these different inscriber presses. So if I take gold plate and we put that, hold on a second. Yeah, if we put that in here, I like to throw all these together because there's no recipe conflicts with that. Yeah, look at that, 20 logic circuits per second. Yeah, very, very nice. So I recommend getting these. These are kind of like the centrifuge in the sense that there's nothing fancy about them. Just energy hatch and muffler hatch and maintenance hatch, all that stuff. Very standard. Now compressor, this is an interesting one. Yeah, so first of all, the glass tier does not matter. So you could put mana glass, borosilicate, whatever you need. It's kind of weird. If we actually take a look at the placement of some of these hatches, you can always go to multi-block structure when you're looking at the controller. And you can click this right here, the H, Toggle Hatch Position Highlight. This is so handy. This is like relatively new to the game. What you could do is you can hover over this and it'll say hint.1 and it'll tell you what valid hatches go there. So you can put the energy hatch, maintenance hatch, wherever. Look at this, .2, input and output. These have to be on these like 3x3 sides. So very, very specific. Yeah, so be sure to check that out. Yeah, let's get some redstone, for example. And let's come over here, input bus, pop that in real quick. Yeah, 28 blocks of redstone. Boom, just like that. Super easy. So, you know, very, very similar to the results that we're getting from some of these other multis. Very, very cool. All right, we actually have some ore processing multis. These are pretty nice, especially when you get your full like subnetted ore proc system going, which again, we have another tutorial for. I'm going to link that in the description as well. We got all the videos for all this stuff, right? So this is the thermal refinery. So this is going to do thermal centrifuge stuff. So I'm going to take a bunch of like purified iron ore, for example, and we're going to throw that in. Gonna see what happens. There we go. Centrifuged iron ore. Yeah, 3.2 per second. Not too bad at EV power. Yeah, that's respectable. And yeah, and there we are getting some tin dust byproducts as well. Yeah, so much faster than the thermal centrifuge single block. This right here, ore washing plant, I will go ahead and warn you that these casings are a big, big pain in the sense that the grisium actually kind of takes forever to process. I think fluid solidifying is actually quicker than the extruder. Oh, no, actually it isn't. No, the extruder is actually pretty decent. And I haven't gone over all of these materials, by the way, but hopefully you could just look at NEI and you can kind of figure it out and, you know, make these patterns, especially if you're doing AE2 auto crafting at this point in the game. Yeah, auto crafting all of these different processes. Unfortunately, you're still stuck with single block mixers for auto crafting. You will get a multi-block mixer in IVH though. But yeah, grisium could be a little bit tough. There's a couple tough materials, but I have faith that you can get it done. This is going to be several different things. Ore washing. We're going to get a screwdriver out again. Look at the tooltip. Simple washer. So no byproducts. It just, you know, purifies the ore or whatever you put into it. Or chem bath, right? You're probably going to use your first one as an ore washer for ore processing, if I had to guess. And, oh yeah, you do need a reservoir hatch. Yeah, so definitely keep that one in mind. But there we go. Stone dust, purified iron ore, nickel dust. Getting all the byproducts and everything. Freaking awesome. This right here is an amazing multi-block and very versatile as well. There's like several different casings that you can upgrade to get really, really nice results with this. This is the fluid extractor. And having a fluid extractor multi, it really comes in handy around the EVH because you end up having a lot of fluid recipes. So times where you need ingots, and you need to take ingots and fluid extract them. So here I'm going to throw some iron in there again. Let's turn this on. Look at that. Yeah, it processed like almost a stack of iron in like a second. Yeah, that's really, really good. And then there is our molten iron. Perfect. And yeah, let me show you. This is one of the multis where the glass tier actually does matter. So if you want to put an EV energy hatch on here, you do need either your titanium reinforced borosilicate glass, or you can use that mana glass as well, which I think is much, much cheaper. So if you can't do the mana glass, I definitely recommend that. But then there's a couple of other things. Let's take a look at the tooltip of this real quick. 8 parallels per solenoid tier. The solenoid is this right here. These can be a little tricky to make, but you know, the first couple tiers are great results. Even though it's additive, yeah, the first couple tiers are great. But then you also have the energy coil. Gives you a plus 10% speed bonus and 10% EU discount. Multiplicative. So this gets better the higher in the tiers that you go. So you might not notice a huge difference. You know, maybe you just want to throw copper nickel coils on here initially because, you know, you don't want to invest in all the coils because I think you need like, what was it, 24? Yeah, 24 coils. So not inexpensive. But yeah, this is an amazing multi. You're definitely going to be using this far, far into the game. This, you're not going to be using a lot in the game. Unlike the fluid extractor, I don't know if you're going to be using this that much. However, if you are a big chisel fiend, and you want to chisel a bunch of blocks, then you can definitely do this. And so what you do is you take whatever block you want as the final outcome. You take your chisel, and let's say we want like cobblestone with light panel, right? You put that into the controller inventory space right there. And then you take your cobblestone and place that right there. and it's very fast, right? And boom, there we go. So you don't have to worry about, making a bunch of chisels, I guess. Or you could have like a little factory where you're like, making all the different blocks that you need for your base. I don't know. I've really never used this that much, but you may have fun with it, go crazy. And then the final multi-block that we have is the Macerator. Macerator actually used to be way more complex. You used to have to put a bunch of input-output hatches like all over these weird places. All you have to do now is just put input-output bus wherever. And it's pretty straightforward. Does what do you think it would do? Boom, stone dust. And so you'll definitely want these for your ore proc as well, but you'll probably want one as an autocraft machine additionally. So definitely check that out. Voltage tier is going to determine the parallels. Also, you can't do this right away, but you'll eventually get a maceration upgrade chip, right? So this changes it to a tier 2, which basically, as far as I could tell, yeah, it like multiplies the parallels times 4. So actually pretty good. You'll definitely want to go tier 2 by default in the future. Be careful with this, by the way, because the moment that you put this on the controller, until you get the proper casings for this, because tier 2 has different casings, these maceration stack casings. So if I right click with these old casings, boom, and then incomplete structure, right? So this doesn't work anymore. So definitely be prepared whenever you get to that point. All right, it's time to go back to the EV page, and it is time for Epoxid. Epoxid is very important because you need it in order to get advanced circuit boards, which you're basically going to need for all of your future circuits. You're going to be using them with, if I could find it real quick, a lot of things, but definitely the nanos. You're going to make 4 different types of circuits. They all have nano as sort of like their subname. So you get nano assembly, nano processor, etc. And you can see them kind of in order here. Yeah, all the way to nano mainframe, which is going to be your LUV circuit. And you need the LUV circuit for field generators, which you're going to use to make your rocket to Mars. Here's the deal. We got to make Epoxid. Now, how are you going to make it? There's a couple different paths that you can go. There's something called bisphenol A, which is a route that you can go. I actually think that just adds levels of complication where there are simpler large chemical reactor LCR recipes. So I recommend going straight for epichlorohydrin. Yeah. And so what you're going to do is, first of all, I guess I should start at the beginning because you're going to need a certain substance before you can start making epichlorohydrin and thereby epoxid. And that is this right here, acetone. And so acetone, there's several different ways you can get this as well regarding the acetic acid, but I'm going to show you a 2-step process, and that's going to be right here. So you need to make the acetic acid first. And again, there are several different ways to make this. If you have a bunch of carbon monoxide, you can mix that with hydrogen, circuit 24, definitely several things you could do. If you have spare ethylene, I personally don't like using ethylene for this because I want to use it for polyethylene and PTFE, but you could use that for acetic acid as well. I'm going to go the route that is just sort of always renewable. You should always have carbon dust, you should always have hydrogen, you should always have oxygen, right? So I like to turn those into circuit 24, basically into acetic acid. And so what we're doing here is, here's some AE2, right? So yeah, be sure to brush up on your AE2 with the AE2 Ultimate Beginner's Guide that we have in the description. Yeah, basically what we're doing is we are using a pump on an input hatch, setting that to import. Then we're putting a dual interface on here, and then we are clicking this button right here to the dual interface GUI, and then we are dragging over hydrogen. And so that's going to suck in this hydrogen. There we've got the hydrogen in there. Same thing with the oxygen. And then we're using stocking input bus. Hopefully by this point you have done the baby plat line, because the baby plat line is going to allow you to make a bunch of acceleration cards. And as you can see, you need a bunch of platinum for these advanced cards. So definitely check that out. Stocking input bus is amazing because you're not actually putting the item in here. You're just ghosting the item and letting the multi-block see what is in the AE2 storage, right? So it can see the carbon dust, and therefore all 3 ingredients are here. We've got circuit 24, program circuit in the controller, and boom, there's our acetic acid. What's the other step? Other step is actually really easy. So calcium dust, which is not consumed, so you actually just need 1 calcium dust sitting in an input bus. So not too bad. And then you need the acetic acid. circuit 3. So we've got a program circuit 3 inside of this controller. And then, I mean, here's a bit of a difficult part with it is that you have 3 different outputs. So you have to deal with all 3 of these. The acetone is definitely what we're after. But yeah, if I turn this on, boom, there we are. We're getting all 3. And so, first of all, we're using the output hatch, which we've locked to acetic acid from this LCR. And we have this pointing to the right toward an input hatch, right? So that this LCR can receive the acetic acid. Yeah, so the beauty of wall sharing, right? With certain things like that. And by the way, you will want to upgrade these input hatches eventually. HV 64,000 liters is really good for this point in the game, but, you know, take yourself to LUV ZPMH. This could be a little bit outdated as far as its throughput goes. Keeping that in mind with all these passive processes, you might want to come and like upgrade these hatches occasionally. So we have acetone, which is then being sent to this super tank right here. And we have a storage bus, fluid storage bus, set to extract only so that the rest of our network can see the acetone and use it for the epoxid ultimately. And then we've got this carbon dioxide. And I have that set to void overflow because we never want carbon dioxide to clog up the works, right? And what you can do, again, another fluid storage bus, set that extract only. But here's the cool thing. Let's say you have carbon monoxide like normally in your system, or sorry, carbon dioxide. Let's say you have this normally in your system, but let's say you want to prioritize the use of this fluid over stuff that you keep, you know, in other ways. You want to prioritize this. You actually take the priority, so, you know, normally this is just set to 0. Take the priority down to -1. That way this stuff gets used up first, and you are less likely to void this potentially. And so you'll see us do that with a lot of different fluids that are sort of like byproducts of these processes. Yeah. And then water, fluid trash can from extra utilities, right? So that takes care of that. And so there you go. You've got your acetone. You might need acetone for other things in the future. I actually forget what all you need this for in the future. But I kind of like having it as like a separate process, right? You can actually use it for raw gasoline, for high octane gasoline apparently. So... all right, here we go. Here's the epoxid. These are the final 2 steps. So you're going to be making epichlorohydrin. Now, epichlorohydrin is kind of a pain. It's not too bad. You need propene, you need chlorine, you need water. And by the way, I am going to add the caveat that there are other ways to do this. So if you've been getting glycerol from biodiesel, you can make epichlorohydrin this way as well, right? So always look at NEI, look at your different options. But I'm just giving you the options that I think are the most seamless, the easiest to get into. And so propene, hopefully you've got oil distillation going and you're getting some propene from that. Chlorine, you should have chlorine taken care of somewhere else in your network by now. And then water, and then sodium hydroxide. This sodium hydroxide is actually going to recycle. You just need like a stack or 2 to kind of prime the system. So yeah, get a couple stacks of sodium hydroxide at the most. And I'm actually going to throw them into this input bus right here that's connected to this electrolyzer. Because we're going to be dealing with salt water in a second. I'll show you that. But here's what you do. You take all 3 of those. Circuit 23 in the controller block once again. And here we go. There's our water from our water reservoir. There is propene. We're providing it the exact same way that we were over in the previous LCR. And then chlorine as well. And then, yeah, we're getting a couple of different things from this. Let's talk about the results. So you get the epichlorohydrin. And epichlorohydrin, I believe we are doing right here. Yeah, so we've got an output hatch once again locked to epichlorohydrin that then sends it to the next wall shared LCR with an input hatch. Perfect. Now, some other outputs that we have are hydrochloric acid, which, again, I like to keep a super tank nearby, set that to void, but then set that priority to -1, so this stuff gets used up first. Very, very handy. By the way, you could figure out ways to do some recycling here because you're going to get chlorine and hydrogen as well. You could make some more hydrochloric acid on site. I don't like doing that because it doesn't work out 1-to-1 perfectly as a loop. And quite honestly, you probably just need to be centralizing some of this stuff at a certain point. So you probably just need to be making hydrochloric acid elsewhere anyway. Here's what happens. You also get salt water. And here's the thing. The final epoxid, you also get salt water. Salt water from both of these. So we actually have a output hatch in the middle, wall shared with both LCRs, because they both make salt water. And then we have that going into an electrolyzer. Very hard to see with this cable here. Yeah, getting power to this is a little bit awkward. But yeah, we've got an electrolyzer, circuit 1, because you're going to be taking this process right here, salt water, circuit 1, with an empty cell and an electrolyzer. That's going to give you chlorine, hydrogen cell, sodium hydroxide dust, right? So you've got the fluid, chlorine, which we just have outputting right next to it. Easy. But then the two items, the hydrogen cell and the sodium hydroxide, we have being extracted via item conduit right here. And then the sodium hydroxide goes here. You do need to filter at least one item filter from Ender IO to make this work. Otherwise, you'll just have the hydrogen cells go in here, for example. But then, yeah, hydrogen cells go in here. And then we have a conveyor that's going to bring the empty cells back to this electrolyzer. So yeah, this whole thing kind of loops. And we get extra chlorine and hydrogen for our network to use. And once again, priority -1, because that ends up... I know -1, you would think it would get used last. But when stuff is being extracted as opposed to inserted, it actually does the reverse of what you would think with priority. So if we were inserting, -1 would be lower than 0. But because we're extracting, -1 actually is higher than 0. So it's basically the reverse effect when you're extracting in AE2. All the priority AE2 logic works that way. And so let's take a look at the final thing, molten epoxid. We are doing circuit 24, right? So we need a bunch of different fluids here, including our epichlorohydrin, which we were getting in the front. I showed you that earlier. We get molten epoxid and the salt water. And so molten epoxid, we're just doing right here, output hatch into a super tank. You don't have to have your super tank local here. You could have it in like a main fluid storage area. So you could just have this sending directly into a dual interface. But I'm just keeping it here. So fluid storage bus, priority 0, extract only. But yeah, we've got a bunch of inputs as well that we have to deal with. So hydrochloric acid, that's definitely one of them. We're doing it the exact same way, dual interface and everything. Also, we've got phenol, which we're actually getting, I think you get this from distillation of wood tar is one of the big ways that you can get this. But you also, looks like you can distill heavy fuel and also get that. So you'll have to take a look at that. You'll have to make sure that you have some phenol going on. You could also figure out a way with the LCRs, like benzene, chlorine, and water. Yeah, you're just going to have to look at the different ways that you could source this. Phenol could be a little bit annoying if you're not doing benzene, I'm sorry to say. But yeah, take a look at that. Phenol, you're definitely going to need. And then acetone. So this acetone is being drawn directly from this super tank over here that we showed earlier for the whole dual LCR acetone setup. And yeah, once again, hydrogen, of course, being extracted from this, priority -1. And yeah, that's basically going to do it. There's our circuit 24. And yeah, we're getting molten epoxid. And so once you get molten epoxid, you're kind of set. You're kind of set. You can go two different directions. You're going to need some of these reinforced glass boards for certain circuits in the future. Yeah, you need them for Lapotronic energy orbs, which is really important later on. So that's one use. But yeah, the main use is definitely going to be these epoxid boards, these advanced circuit boards. Electrum foil, gold foil are very slow in the bending machine. So definitely get yourself that bending machine multi-block. You're going to have a much, much better time with that. And then you need to make nano CPU wafers. This is kind of annoying, by the way, because molten glowstone, not bad. You could just use that fluid extractor multi that we showed earlier. You have to make these CPU wafers, which you've already been doing. But this right here, raw carbon fiber, yeah, I kind of recommend, like, if you're going to autocraft this stuff, just have like an autoclave that always has polyethylene in it maybe, and then you just give it carbon dust. You can get the raw carbon fiber, because you are going to need a lot of these for these nano CPUs. And so yeah, you only need an HV cutting machine for that. But then you can just start getting into these nano processors, and you're just going to follow the quests. All of this is very, very self-explanatory. All right, so you should be able to get into that. I believe you're going to need the EV circuit assembler. Yeah, you're going to need the EV circuit assembler at a certain point. So I definitely want to talk about that soon, because that's a whole other can of worms trying to get to that. Actually, you know what? We're going to get into the EV circuit assembler right now. But right before I do that, I'm going to show you all a couple things. At this point, you can get the advanced cutting machine, and you can actually start to get your EV energy hatches. Because you got tungsten steel earlier, and EV energy hatches are really going to be helpful for some of these processes. Borderline necessary, because some things are just so slow. The sooner you can get into that, the better, right? But yeah, if you're trying to make your nanos, you got to go this route first. So you got to get this chemical bath. Yeah, you are going to need an EV chemical bath. You could use the multi-block. Honestly, though, it's kind of nice just to have a single block at a certain point. Throughput with this is not as big of a deal for what we're about to make, which is these quantum eyes. Yeah, quantum eyes, Eye of Ender, and Radon. Well, how the heck are we going to get Radon? This looks like a whole can of worms, right? Well, yeah, it is. There's a couple different ways to source it. You will eventually use this LCR recipe right here, and you'll actually loop this. So what's going to happen is that you're going to use plutonium-239 ingots, which you don't have right now. That's going to make dust and some radon. So yeah, just air and a little bit of uranium-238, right? That's going to make radon, which is what you want. So you want to just keep sourcing this stuff. But then what you're going to do is probably make a multi-smelter, multi-block, and you're going to take the plutonium-239 and you're going to smelt it right back into ingots again, right? Getting your first 8 of this can definitely be a big pain, because let me show you how you do that. It is probably going to be with the centrifuge. You're going to take uranium-238, which again, you're going to get in Mars. So you're going to get this pretty soon. And yeah, 5% chance to get plutonium-239. So you probably have to do this at least on average 20 times 8. So 160 uranium-238 dust through this. And hopefully you have that multi-block centrifuge, because this is pretty slow initially, right? But definitely get a multi-block centrifuge before you try this. But we don't really have uranium-238 yet. There are technically ways that you can get it. There's something called stabaloid dust. You can get a stabaloid construct farm. If you're interested in checking that out, try checking like the GTNH Discord, etc. You're going to be making witchery biome potions. You're going to make a toxic Everglades biome. Then you're going to try to get a stabaloid construct to spawn. You're going to use a soul vial to capture it. You're going to make a powered spawner out of that. Definitely a lot involved with that. That is a nice source of titanium and uranium-238. So do check that out if you're interested in it. But let me show you the way that you're kind of intended to get radon initially. And that is this right here. This is an electrolyzer with decayed radium-226 dust. So how do you get that stuff? Well, you get that through the decay of radium-226 dust, right? So you want to put this dust inside of a lead-lined box, which isn't too difficult to craft. Like just a bunch of lead, silicon rubber, actually you can use normal rubber. LV machine hole, yeah, not too bad. But how do you get the radium-226? Well, you get it through sifting. So hopefully you've got that multi-block sifter, because that's going to help a lot with this. And yeah, the way you get this stuff is sifting purified thorium ore. Yeah, there's some other options, but pretty much the thorium is probably all you have access to at this point. And you've probably gotten that from the nether. Hopefully you have by now. And yeah, you're just going to use a simple washer to turn it into purified. Oh, well, you probably want to use an ore washer because you get a chance to get uranium-238 as well, which is kind of nice. But yeah, you're going to take this dust, you're going to put it inside that lead line box, and it's going to take an hour. And you can only fit 15 in this lead line box. Let me actually show you real quick. Oh, well, unfortunately, it is invisible. Yeah, I'm having some visualization issues in my current version of the game right now. But yeah, basically you put these radon-226 or radium-226 in here, and they'll eventually decay into this stuff, the decayed radium-226. And then you can electrolyze that, right? So you're going to get your first radon this way. That's going to be enough to make, just if you stay on top of it, you should be able to make quite a few quantum eyes. And then, ultimately, you're going to be using that to make EV sensors, EV emitters, right? And those are pretty important because, well, you need the EV emitter at least for the EV circuit assembler. Yeah, and so once you get that, you should be able to get all of your nanoprocessors and your first nano mainframes, which is going to be huge. And then you're going to use that to make your first EV fuel generators. And you're going to need 2 of these. And yeah, the reason that you need 2 of them is this right here. Rocket Control Computer Tier 2 requires 2 EV fuel generators. Make sure you put your assembler in the clean room, by the way. One of the few times that you need an assembler in the clean room. That's going to allow you to make your rocket. Some other things to note about the rocket. Yeah, you're going to make a Tier 2 rocket. You're going to do the same thing that you did on the moon, basically. If you're going to go to Mars, you're going to go to the space race section. One of the other things that's kind of difficult to source, by the way, is the thermal stuff that you need. Thermal cloth, which is invisible right now as well, for some reason. You need a lot of cotton for this, especially. And hopefully you've gotten enough meteoric iron because you're going to need 216 of the string. So I don't know how much this ends up shaking out to be, but quite a few long rods in a wire mill. Also notice the time on this. So you'll want to get this started sooner than later because you need 216, 24 thermal cloth. And yeah, you're going to make this because otherwise I think you take damage if you try to go to Mars without it. But yeah, you're also going to need meteoric iron for these heavy duty alloy ingots tier 2. And so in the HV guide, I did talk about meteoric iron some, how you can like wait for those meteors to fall and you can find it that way, or you can find crushed ores inside of your auto miner. But yeah, I would say you probably need, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it feels like 2 stacks of meteoric iron. It's probably pretty safe. And yeah, you'll need EV assembler as well. There's that tungsten steel. Yeah, so you're going to need tungsten steel. And yeah, you're going to take that rocket to Mars. Let's actually talk about what you get from Mars a little bit. So yeah, there's this whole section of EV. So you could take a look at some of these quests right here in the bottom left corner. You know, once you get your rocket, and there's 3 different planets that you can go to. Mars, Deimos, and Phobos. Those are the 2 moons of Mars. And so, probably one of the first things you're looking for on Mars is a Desh vein. So the raw Desh ore, you're going to get right here. But you're also going to get scheelite and tungstate. Look at that. Dude, we were just talking about scheelite and tungstate, which are, you know, kind of like the backbone of everything we're doing for tungsten steel, right? You put your tungstate dust right here, your scheelite dust right here, and you should be getting way, way more of this tungsten trioxide dust. And then the Desh also you will need for tier 3 rocket. So yeah, hang on to your Desh for that. So you're also going to get uraninite ore, which you can get from either uranium-238 vein from Deimos or Phobos, or pitch blend vein, which you'll also find on Mars and Phobos. And so yeah, that stuff is ultimately going to allow you to get uranium-238. The uraninite you can centrifuge into uranium-238. Obviously, if you get raw uranium-238 ore, you can process that directly into 238, which is nice. And again, you're going to need a lot of that also once you get your radon loop fully established with the plutonium-239. And again, I'm going to remind you the fact that you put this in the centrifuge and you get a 5% chance of plutonium-239. That's how you're going to get your first plutonium-239 for this loop right here for radon. Because you'll need a lot of radon in the future. You know, we could take a look at Mars. We could take a look at these planets and see, you know, what else is around. Quartz, because you're probably going to need a lot of quartz, Certus quartz. Barite's kind of important a little bit later on. Gold, beryllium, tetrahedrite, you know, that's kind of standard fare. There's the uranium-238 from Deimos. This is Deimos. Tungstate vein, also really good. Monazite you will need in evage to get samarium. So yeah, you'll want to check that out. Draconium is kind of okay, right? Don't really need a lot of that at this point in the game. But you might as well grab some, right? Ori Haricon can make like really nice turbine for like a large gas turbine stuff, which we will talk about in a second. And then you got Phobos, which kind of this similar stuff going on here. Diamond vein, that's kind of nice because you need more diamonds later on. There's a quartz vein again. And some more bauxite if you didn't get enough from the moon. And there you go. Yeah, that's the basic idea behind that. So yeah, you want to get that rocket, take off, go get all of your ores. I'm sure you'll have to do some back and forth, between some of the different planets. By the way, ignore this egg quest unless you're really antsy to do it. It's kind of a meme, but it is a way that you can make a dragon egg, technically. I did it once, and I never want to do it again. That's all I'll say. By the way, you can also find bacterial sludge on Mars. It's kind of in cavernous parts, so you'll encounter these large cavernous places inside the planet, and you can take a bucket and you can get a bunch of bacterial sludge this way. That gives you the Spectre key, and if you're not familiar with the Spectre key, you can hold right-click with it, and you'll get some particle effects. Keep holding. You'll eventually get taken to this area here, which is like a single chunk. It's like your own little special dimension. And so I like to set up like oxygen gear and stuff here. Because it's sort of like a one-way ticket. You always keep your Spectre key on you. You always have access to things like oxygen. And you like emergency supplies, things like that. All right, we're coming around the bend, everybody. Our final topic is going to be about power. And we're not getting too heavily into everything. I'm just going to take a cursory glance at what options you have for power in this age. Kind of depends on what you've been using previously as well. But let's take a look at a couple things. So if you've done benzene, you get benzene from wood tar mainly. You could keep using benzene. You could keep scaling it. But you also have access to something called nitrobenzene at this point. So you would have to make a chemical plant. That's a whole other can of worms. It's called ExxonMobil Chemical Plant. Definitely check it out. But yeah, you can make that. It's going to require some additional inputs, so solving these can be a bit of a quandary. Not too bad, though. Distilled water is probably one of the easiest. Distillation tower, water into distilled water, right? Not too difficult to scale. Another thing is sulfuric acid, which can probably be one of the trickier parts. If you have access to a lot of sulfur dust, one of the easiest things to do is just take oxygen, water, sulfur dust, right? It's sort of like a surefire way. Now, other ways that you might have to sort of supplement that are your hydrogen sulfide that you're getting from desulfurizing the oil products, right? So you're probably getting that from adding hydrogen to natural gas and sulfuric into refinery, sulfuric naphtha into naphtha. You get the idea, right? So you'll have to take a look at the different recipes in NEI for getting sulfuric acid. Finally, there is nitric acid. And probably the best way to do this is going to be this recipe right here with the ammonia. So you take oxygen, you take ammonia. Ammonia is something that you need a lot of when it comes to the plat line as well. So it's something that you're going to have to scale up a whole lot. Ammonia can be one of the slowest parts of all the entire plat line. So definitely look at that. And that's generally going to be nitrogen and hydrogen, right? So you're looking at nitrogen and hydrogen for that step, and then adding oxygen circa 24 to get nitric acid. Definitely sustainable, but you got to do some work to get nitrobenzene. If we take a look at the benefits of that, benzene normally gives you 360,000 EU per 1,000 liters, just in a normal single block gas turbine. Nitrobenzene, 1.6 million. So it's like 4 to 5 times the amount of power. So definitely worth looking at. Another option that you have is cetane boosted diesel, which you might have already made at the end of HVH. But we'll take a look at this real quick. You could take either your biodiesel or your diesel that you've been making, also known as fuel, and then you just add it in an LCR with tetranitromethane. So the way you get this stuff is nitric acid, which we talked about earlier, how to get that, with ethanone. And then ethanone is just sulfuric acid and acetic acid. So yeah, another reason you might want to have acetic acid over here, and you might want it even independent of the acetone production, right? So you might want to really soup up your acetic acid production separately from that. So that's something else that you can look at. I will give an honorable mention because it is becoming more and more the meta in GTNH lately. Nuclear power. When people do nuclear power, they're usually referring to vac nukes. So you use a vacuum freezer. It requires a lot of redstone knowledge, or there's another thing called Steve's factory manager, right? Which is really good at managing it. There might be open computer solutions as well. Definitely beyond the scope of this guide. In fact, I've never actually tried vac nukes myself, but I've heard very good things. If you're willing to risk it, right? Make sure you take backups. But yeah, whatever you decide, you're probably going to start wanting to use one of these things. So cetane boosted diesel, you're going to want to use large combustion generators, and you're generally not going to want these on all the time. So you're going to want to set like a RS latch to turn them on and off as you need them. I know that's definitely true with the large gas turbine, which you're going to put your benzene or your nitrobenzene in. And then the question becomes like, what to do with all that power? Because it's got a ramp up time. It's got a ramp down. Like, you don't want this running all the time. And generally, when you get to this point in the game, you want a battery buffer, like a pretty significant battery buffer. And then you're going to start centralizing power. And so what you really want for that is this right here, Lapotronic Supercapacitor. This is something that you use throughout the rest of the entire game as your battery storage. So definitely recommend that. I didn't put a maintenance hatch on here. That's why it's not complete. But yeah, the idea is that each of these capacitors, you can put, you can make EV. So you probably start out with these right here. So you need Lapotron crystals for that. IV will use Lapotronic energy ore, which is a little bit more complicated with the platinum plate right there. You get the idea, right? And also you can make this even taller. So I think if I take like a bunch of these, right? Yeah, you can make it like that tall, for example, which is really cool. So I don't remember if there's a height limit on this thing actually, but there is a pretty beefy tooltip. You'll want to read all this tooltip and understand it. Some of it has to do with wireless and you won't need to know right away. This is one of those where the glass tier also matters. So the tier -3 of the highest capacitor is the glass that you need. So if I had LUV capacitor in here, it would be 6 -3. So I would need at least the borosilicate HV glass. Definitely check that out. If you're looking for a guide a little bit more in-depth, we do have a guide on setting up large gas turbines, specifically with the Lapotronic Supercapacitor. So we'll show that on screen. Be sure to check out that video if you're interested in that as well. I do walk through it in much more detail for you. All right, that about wraps things up for us. Did we do it in under an hour? I don't know if we actually did at the time of this recording, but hopefully we did. There's a lot more to go over. Again, please check out those other guides as well if you're looking for more in-depth into AE2 or the large gas turbine, LSC, or the plat line, any of these number of things. Be sure to go check that out. Also, leave in the comments what you'd like to see next, because if it wasn't for all of y'all requesting the EV video, I might not have actually done this. So yeah, be sure to check out our Discord as well, where we have a bunch of helpful people there, always chatting, always giving some GTNH help. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help the channel out. It really does help us out a lot. And until next time, we will see you all very soon. Take care.